Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Indicators and KPIs. How can they help in managing a project management office? My name is Tobias Schroeder, and I'm Content Marketing Manager here at SoftExpert. This webinar was created by Maria Angélica Castellani, who has over 20 years experience in project management and business process management, and it will be presented by Gus Oliveira, an International Product Marketing Manager here at SoftExpert. I wish you all a great webinar.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Tobias. Hello, everyone, and thank you for downloading this webinar. So let's start by talking about analyzing why is it that we need indicators or KPIs to help us manage a project management office or a PMO. The reason why we need indicators and KPIs to help us with this management is because organizational scenarios that our projects are in, they're made up of external influences, okay? And we constantly have, for example, technological advances, and companies, they need improvement, okay? Especially when it comes to managing time, reducing costs, improving product, and etc. So we constantly have improvements and new processes. So this scenario, from the time they started companies and organizations, these were scenarios of unpredictability, of very speed, they were very fast-paced, constant changes, and also an increasing number of stakeholders. So our projects 10 to 15 years ago didn't have as many stakeholders, for example, as they have today. What that means is that the project manager today has a lot more work to do. So, what are the goals of a project management office? Obviously, a project management office is within an organization or it's a department to help in relation to some improvement, because evidently project management grew so much and it now needs someone to better manage the execution of all these projects. What does that mean? That means that there's a need for someone to implement, analyze best practice, do maturity analysis, and someone to worry about, let's say, staff training and so on. So these objectives can be all geared towards, let's say, profitability, increased revenue, or to have an increase in competitiveness, production. So eventually, every project can then become a process. So organizational benefits or values, they have to be generated and skills have to be developed in order to gain better competitiveness, okay? Somehow, these project offices, they have to show results. And let's say if I'm thinking, how do I set up the organization to increase competitiveness, okay? Or how do I turn this theory into a number? Or how do I quantify the development of a new skill? Or how do I quantify the improvement of a project management, okay? So this project management office, what it has to do is help in the growth of the company, okay? And also help in its development and aggregate value. That's the main objective. So today, for this webinar, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on managing the PMO. So then, what should the PMO do, or the project management office? What should it do? First of all, it should know all of the opportunities and threats because it needs to know where it stands, okay? What was defined within the company? The PMO needs to find its way. So what are its duties? Because a PMO could have different objectives within the company, but they won't be able to achieve them all. Therefore, it needs to select its main objectives. So what will it do now? What was decided that it will do? How will it evaluate and follow up on service quality? Where is it delivering value? Where is it being profitable beyond financial figures? So what we have to do is try to find support and eliminate resistance. But who would offer resistance? Actually, all of the users of the PMO can actually offer some resistance. So the PMO needs to identify its client base, okay? It needs to understand its necessities, understand exactly what's going to do, know where its weaknesses are, where its strengths are, and how it can collaborate and what it needs to develop in order to collaborate. And obviously, it needs to set its goals alongside its stakeholders, who in this case would be all of the clients of the project office. Beyond that, it should offer support to employees, to project managers, and to those that don't know what a project management office is. Explain to them why it's there, the concept of a PMO, which is something relatively new, and just now companies are seeing the necessities of having such an office or department. So the PMO needs to work with managers and executives and the organization as a whole, right from the start of the strategic planning stage, because that's where all the projects are contemplated. So for example, what are we going to do for the year, let's say 2020? That might seem a little bit far off from now, but a lot of companies are already starting to think about how are they going to organize themselves, preparing for the next 3, 5, 7, and up to 10 years. The PMO should also follow up from the first stages, guiding executives and senior managers, and should deliver results that were defined according to the goals that were set during the strategic planning. So the PMO should identify, analyze, consolidate, and translate business strategies all into actions and somehow show the results of these actions. So the PMO, it needs to quantify and measure what it's doing. The difference is within the duties that each project office can perform in order to produce greater competitive advantage for the entire organization. And that's where lies the impact of the project office, finding what are the duties that it needs to perform. And obviously, it also needs to deliver value. Deliver value related to project performance. What do I mean by value then? I mean deliver improvements, deliver results, do things efficiently and effectively, do things right, but beyond that, you got to do things well. Service performance means that we're performing a service, and how are the projects being developed? And obviously, business performance as a whole. So it needs to take a complete look forward to results as well as strategies. And where should it start? It should start by analyzing how it will perform these duties, how it will define its duties to meet its goals. Dr. Brian Hobbs did a research in various countries, and he gathered 500 companies of different sizes and sectors. And in this research, these companies provided information on what they actually did. The result of this research was published by PMI in 2006, and from there, every task from the PMO was derived from these objectives. He did this research because he wanted to know what exactly did PMOs do around the world, regardless of the methodology used, since there wasn't a best practice manuals for PMOs. And that's where he found 27 services in common between these PMOs. That is, from the list of 500 PMOs, they all did some of these 27 services. One of them, for example, is provide project status to executives, define and implement methodologies to manage projects, monitor and control project performance, and so on. So, for example, if you look here at number 8, define and manage KPIs and dashboards, 58% of these 500 companies, or more than 250 companies, are doing this type of control using indicators. And that's all part of the activities of the project office. Other companies, for example, manage one or more programs or perform project audits and manage one or more portfolios and so on. And that's what we've seen from our webinars and speaking to our clients mirrors the result of this research. Rarely do we see PMOs that do exactly the same functions, okay? For example, we've had a case where the PMO from a bank marked that they did 3 or 5 of these functions, while other PMO from a retail company marked nearly all of them, which showed that their PMO was a lot more involved in the operational side of the project. So I can tell you from experience that this diversity of functions, it really does exist. So now we come to the last of the 27 functions used, okay? In this case, these are the least common functions performed. For example, perform revision post-project, implement and manage risk database, manage program benefits, and so on. So from here, what should we do? Well, first, I'm going to define the objectives of my PMO, and then I'll mention what my plan of action is going to be, obviously aligning everything with my stakeholders and clients of my project office. So let's say that we already selected our objectives. So now, how do we measure? What do we need to measure? We need to measure our targets and our goals. In this measurement of our targets, we're going to measure it leading to our goal, and this measurement will vary along the way. It can either increase or decrease, okay? And regardless of our goal, we need to have the right data to make the correct decision. We need to measure it because the levels of uncertainty and unpredictability is always increasing. You may have to decide on what's a priority today, which may be different of what's going to be a priority tomorrow. So, if you don't have concrete information and data, how will you be able to make critical decisions? How can you be sure that you're making the right decisions if you don't have the data or the numbers to back you up? This is the great demand today in organizations. They want the ability to measure all the intangibles so they can make an educated decision. And this is done using indicators and KPIs. So, in order to inform, you absolutely need to measure. So now, here comes the question. How are we going to measure? We can measure services, critical situations, benefits, aggregated values, and many more options according to your strategic plan. To do that, we'll need indicators, okay? Common indicators and KPIs. We're going to need deadlines, time to reach a certain target, and we'll need to define actions. We're not going to say, well, we need to be at a certain place and then just wait for however long it takes. That's not how it works. We have to define what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and how long we're going to do it in order to reach our target. So the owner of these indicators are responsible for these actions. So these elements, they're obviously metrics, indicators. Now, all indicators are metrics, but not all metrics are indicators. And we have our special or critical indicators that are our KPIs. So these are the elements to measure. And lastly, another important element to measure is our mindset. We have to change the way we think. A lot of people think that defining an indicator is, to simply copy some formula. They think, oh, what are your strategic indicators, or how do you calculate them? And they say, okay, then I'm just going to do it the same way you do. But, that's not how it works. You can find many places to copy tactical indicators, but then what? How are you going to analyze them? Are they aligned with your organization's strategies and scenarios? And that's where we have a problem, where our mindset was prepared to analyze aggregated value that already has a set formula, and we already know what to do with this result. So we need to change that, because an indicator is a definition. I need to know how to define an indicator. I have to understand the logic behind it first, so then I can translate this logic into a value, into a formula, or a numeric expression. So for example, what would be these great objectives? Project revisions after project closures, implement and manage database of lessons learned, and perform audits. So for example, if I audit, I have to check what I've taught, lessons learned and so on. I have a set of elements that I must analyze and decide if I'm going to measure it or not. So when we talk about performing audits, some things we should measure includes nonconformity, percentage, methodology adherence rate, percentage of audited projects, average of nonconformities per project, and so on. You just should sit down and start to logically relate your actions to your measurements. And so now I'll explain to you a few steps that should be followed to define indicators. So where do we start? Well, we always start with our stakeholders. I have to start thinking about what are the needs of the stakeholders? What problems are they having? We need to understand this so we can then deliver exactly what they need. Each stakeholder may suggest different problems or state different needs, but with the PMO or portfolio that you are working with, you must reach a success consensus. That is, where do we want to go? Where do we need to be? Because everyone's going to think about their own needs. So we need to reach a consensus about what the company needs to be successful. We need to find a consensus so then we can direct all of our efforts. From here, we now have to find the critical factors. That is, all of the activities that needed to be conducted so then I can achieve the success. So from these critical factors, I can then start to understand what I need to measure. And that's when I'll define a performance indicator system, prioritizing from the most to the least important. Then I have to define my targets and calculations for these indicators, define what I'm going to do so they can evolve. I also need to computerize my system. Am I going to control my indicators through a spreadsheet? Do we have a specific system like SoftExpert's corporate performance management solution? Are we going to develop our own in-house system? Then we need to figure out how we're going to collect our data. Where am I going to get them from? Do I need to involve other people, other teams, or other departments? What are the other people involved going to be responsible for? This is all something that has to be thought of very, very carefully, because sometimes people might give you the wrong data due to the fear of showing you that their department is not underperforming. After we've obtained all of the data, now we have to show this data. We are measuring indicators so that they can be used and not just stored somewhere and then forgotten about. We need dashboards, we need systems, emails, or whatever other method you need to display your measurements. This communication is not going to be through just one dashboard, okay? You can have different dashboards for different departments, different teams, different locations, different stakeholders, and so on. In the beginning, we talked to the stakeholders to find out what they needed, okay? Now, it's time to show them how we're doing regarding their needs. And it's very important that we don't mix, for example, a dashboard that we create for our clients with, let's say, a dashboard that is used by our financial department and so on. We need to figure out not just how we're going to display the data, but also what we're going to show. Next, we move on to benchmarking. So we have examples of other companies so we can compare ourselves to, and also examples that we may want to emulate. Now, it's also very important for us to follow the PDCA lifecycle. I'm going to define my indicators, change targets, and depending on my experience, I'll add more indicators, okay? And how do you get experience? Well, you get experience by actually doing it. You won't know everything from the start, okay? You have to train, learn from your mistakes, and then you can improve. So this constant PDCA with lessons learned is very, very important. Lastly, we have knowledge management. We have to add to the company's knowledge database. We have to document lessons learned, what worked and what didn't work. Now, we've come to the end of our cycle, but our work here is definitely not done. It's actually just beginning. Now, it's time to take all of our lessons learned, audits, indicators, targets, and we can see how we can improve.
Thank you for downloading and being part of this webinar. If you have any questions or would like to get in touch with Gus, please email him at gustavo.oliveira@softexpert.com. For more webinars, please visit our website www.softexpert.com. See you next time.